We've come together in a coalition that includes labor unions, business leaders, people of faith, fraternal organizations, community groups, civic associations, young people, seniors, and people from a diversity of racial and ethnic backgrounds. We're unified in our resolve to educate the voting public about potential obstacles to the ballot box, to remove barriers to voting, and to expand, not diminish, options and opportunities for voter participation. We are the Pennsylvania Voting Rights Coalition, a nonpartisan statewide gathering of diverse individuals and groups united in mission and in purpose. We come together as the Pennsylvania Voter ID. We came together as the Pennsylvania Voter ID Coalition in March 2012 on the eve of the Commonwealth's enactment of one of the most restrictive so-called voter ID laws in the country, an unnecessary obstacle to voting that particularly impacts poor people, senior citizens, young adults, people of color, persons with disabilities, and urban populations. Advocates and defenders of the law still have not provided any evidence that in-person voter impersonation fraud is a problem in Pennsylvania, nor can they cite a single instance of it in our state. Conversely, Pennsylvania's Secretary to Commonwealth, when she was lobbying in favor of the law, repeatedly stated that she believed that only 1% of Pennsylvania voters, more than 80,000 voters by the way, do not have acceptable ID for voting. And it is very likely that the real number will be revealed to be several times higher. For those of us who believe in democracy and its foundational principles, who value the sacrifices made on the battlefields of history to defend it, and who honor the civil rights activists who took action to expand it to every American, even one citizen deprived of the right to vote is one too many. In response to passage of the law, the coalition built alliances. We trained individuals to speak at public gatherings and produced nonpartisan educational material for distribution across the state. Volunteers contacted voters by phone and in busy public locations, even going door to door to educate the public about the law's requirements and to offer assistance in getting one of the very limited forms of acceptable voter ID. Thankfully, a legal effort undertaken by some of our partners succeeded in stopping enforcement of the law just weeks before the 2012 presidential election. And we sincerely hope that this same legal team will succeed in the efforts to have the law struck down as unconstitutional when it returns to Commonwealth Court next Monday, July 15th at 1 p.m. We encourage all supporters of voting rights to be present in the courtroom throughout the multi-day hearing at the Pennsylvania Judicial Center, 601 Commonwealth Avenue in Harrisburg on the 3rd floor. Whatever the outcome, our coalition is launching a voter registration and outreach campaign to educate voters with accurate information about the status of the law. We will resume sponsoring voter ID assistance clinics as necessary in union halls, religious facilities, and other traditional and non-traditional meeting places in targeted communities. Our goal is to ensure that no Pennsylvanian is deprived of his or her opportunity to vote. Additionally, in light of the new attacks on voting rights, most notably the recent U.S. Supreme Court decision to strike down a crucial section of the 1965 Voting Rights Act, while we are registering and educating voters, we will also be mobilizing them to take action to defend the right to vote. For that reason, the Pennsylvania Voter ID Coalition is now operating as the Pennsylvania Voting Rights Coalition. The coalition has endorsed and will participate in a rally for justice and voting rights in the main rotunda of the State Capitol building tomorrow afternoon, July 11th at 1 o'clock. The coalition is also urging all partners and allies to participate in efforts already underway to commemorate the upcoming 50th anniversary of the 1963 March on Washington, scheduled for August 24th, calling on Congress to restore the invalidated protections of the 1965 Voting Rights Act. We will not go back.
I'm Liz McElroy. I'm the Secretary-Treasurer of the AFL-CIO here in Philadelphia. The AFL-CIO is a coalition, an umbrella organization to represent over 100 trade unions and over 150,000 union members in the area. We stand here as part of the coalition. The AFL-CIO, I think people will know, have a long history of fighting for people for civil rights and particularly for voting rights. At the National AFL-CIO, we have a My Right, My Vote voter protection program that runs 24/7 every day, every year, in and out, not just in presidential years. And what we really do is try to educate our members and their families and other members of the general public about their right to vote and the need for it. And as Joe Sertain just said, the need now, today, in 2013, is not any less so than it was 50 years ago in some cases, and it's sad to say that. But with the section of the Voting Rights Act set aside by the Supreme Court, with this sort of notion going on in this country that these rights have already been fought for and won and we don't need to continue fighting for them, we know as the Philadelphia AFL-CIO that we do need to continue fighting for them, and we will stand beside our coalition partners to do that. I'm very proud to represent our unions and our members in this city, and I'm proud that so many of our members are actively engaged in this fight. And until the day when we can say every Pennsylvanian sincerely has the right to vote and free from intimidation, free from jumping through hoops to do so, we'll be here alongside our coalition partners. Thank you.
My name is Karen Black, and I have the privilege of serving as Executive Director of Senior Law Center. We are nonprofit attorneys and advocates who represent older Pennsylvanians. And we are very proud to be a member and a leader of the new Pennsylvania Voting Rights Coalition, the nonpartisan and statewide Pennsylvania Voting Rights Coalition, because we know that our seniors, our parents, our grandparents, our older veterans, those who walked before us and on whose shoulders we stand, they fought and they bled and they suffered for the right to vote. And today, we see obstacles placed in their path on the way to the polling booth. And we're very, very concerned about it. We think it's our obligation and our sacred duty to help protect those rights. And we strongly embrace the mission of the coalition to provide education, to provide outreach, and to provide advocacy to all voters of all ages. Seniors, you should know, are super voters. And what does that mean? They vote in greater numbers in every election than any other population. And they really put younger voters to shame. But what you should know, however, is today it's ironic that our parents and our grandparents are disproportionately affected, disproportionately disenfranchised by our Pennsylvania voter ID law, because nearly 18% of our older Americans do not have the strict type of photo ID that is required by Act 18, the Pennsylvania voter ID law. And while we are thrilled that it is on a hiatus, that there is a temporary injunction, we know that may be only a temporary victory. And we strongly applaud and stand by with gratitude and pride the litigation and the fight that continues in Harrisburg on Monday by our partners and colleagues, ACLU, Public Interest Law Center in Philadelphia, the Advancement Project, and their pro bono counsel, Arnold and Porter. And I'll just end by saying that early in his leadership of America's civil rights struggle, Dr. King called the right to vote the sacred right of suffrage. And he told us that it really the vote represents the foundations of our democracy. And it safeguards every other right we have. And certainly we can see that today with what's going on in our nation and our capital. Dr. King would be 84 years old this year had he lived. No doubt he would be a proud senior citizen. No doubt he would be a member of our coalition. But no doubt he would also be shocked that in 2013 today, we are still fighting to protect our access to the vote.
Just as all Americans watched the Supreme Court last month when it narrowly voted to severely weaken the 1965 Voting Rights Act, all eyes of this nation will be on Pennsylvania's Commonwealth Court Monday, July 15th, when a new judge, Bernard McGinley, takes up the latest legal challenge to the Republican-backed voter ID law in the Keystone State. That Pennsylvania's voter ID statute is an obscene cancer infecting the very concept of democracy in the birthplace of the American democracy has been demonstrated time and time again in extensive court testimony last summer. Remember that GOP state legislator who bragged in 2012 that voter ID would help loser Mitt Romney defeat President Barack Obama in the race for the White House? Remember that guy? So the full measure of the real intent of this voter suppression law was known by most of us from the outset. Additionally, the Coleman administration has repeatedly admitted in open court that it was not prepared to properly fund or provide IDs to all the state's residents who needed them, especially those who could not produce state-sanctioned birth certificates or those who lived in rural areas. One study made by a coalition partner showed that 8 Pennsylvania counties don't even have one PennDOT center where these so-called IDs are supposed to be distributed. And in only 7 other counties are there more than 2 PennDOT centers. So from the very outset, it was clear that the voter ID concept was flawed in its design and grossly inadequate in its delivery. Surely to result in the destructive impact the NAACP has maintained from the beginning. Destructive impact on older voters, as you just heard the young lady talk about, on voters of color, and especially the new Americans who have just become citizens. Voter ID laws will be resisted by the NAACP wherever and whenever they raise their ugly heads. We're looking forward to the battle come July 15th, and we'll be there to the end.
From Pennsylvania's voter ID law to the more recently proposed legislation on the apportionment of the electoral college votes, to the recent decision by the U.S. Supreme Court on the Voting Rights Act of 1965, we feel that there is a conscious effort to define or otherwise impact the equity of the key voice that citizens still have, which is the vote. Prior to the passage of the voter ID law, members of the chapters throughout this state sent more than 1,000 letters and made phone calls to the leadership of the General Assembly to share our concern and our disagreement with the passage of the legislation. However, following its passage, nearly all of our chapters worked with the coalition to get out across the state and to provide education and information to citizens so that they might be prepared for what would await them at the polls. This year marks the 100th anniversary of Delta Sigma Theta sorority. Now, the organization was founded by 22 women whose first public act was to advocate on behalf of voting rights by marching in the Women's Suffrage March. How ironic and how disappointing it is that 100 years later, we are addressing and dealing with the same issue of voting rights and access to voting. While we realize that the summer has started and that it will be hot, we also are reminded of another summer, the Freedom Summer of 1964, when thousands upon thousands went into the southern states, Mississippi, and other states to work towards ending the disenfranchisement of African Americans and their right to vote. We are now confronted with all citizens potentially being disenfranchised with their right to vote. It is our hope that a permanent injunction will be the decision of the court in the trial that is slated to begin on Monday. However, if that is not the case, then we are calling for a process and a realistic time frame that will enable the thousands of Commonwealth citizens who are without ID, as defined by the state, to secure it, as well as a sufficiency of funds from the state to ensure a fair and reasoned approach to the law's implementation.
I'm Stephanie Singer, City Commissioner for the City of Philadelphia. I represent 1.5 million Philadelphians. Some people think that voter ID is dead because it was not enforced for the 2012 general election. Voter ID is alive and well in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. It is the law. And the law is that on November 5th of this year, people will need, in Pennsylvania, a photo ID to vote at the polls. That's the law. As an elected official in charge of elections, I will uphold the law. I do not like this law. Someone asked me yesterday, what can voters do? Well, the first thing is, like on the airplane, you put on your oxygen mask first, and then you help the people around you. So first, make sure every Pennsylvanian should make sure that you have the ID you need to vote. And then the next thing is to get involved and help your friends and neighbors get involved with the Voting Rights Coalition. What else can we do? This person asked, what else can we do to stop this law? To get this law off the books, this law that is now on the books. It is the law of the land. What can we as voters do? Isn't this a democracy? Don't we have power? Well, for this particular voter ID law, it now rests in the hands of the state courts and the state legislature. But voters do have power in a democracy. And that power comes through actually going to the polls and voting. In May, we had a primary election here, and over 90% of eligible Philadelphians didn't bother to go to the polls. We're talking about more or less 900,000 people in Philadelphia who missed a chance to have their voice heard, who missed a chance to show the state that we are a power in this Commonwealth, who threw their power on the ground for other people, other counties, other voters to pick up. If we want to block the voter ID law, if we want to block the law that's coming next in this long series of laws designed to disenfranchise people, this is only one in a series, and there will be future attempts. If we want to block that, we in Philadelphia, we must come out to vote in every election, every time. When you cast a vote, you're voting for a candidate, and you're voting for your neighborhood, and you're voting for your people, and you're voting for Philadelphia. When you cast a vote, every time you cast a vote, you are voting for yourself. Please stop the next law in the series. Please vote in every election, every time.
My name is Gonzalez. I'm the Executive Director of Ceiba, a coalition of community-based organizations in the Latino community of Philadelphia. First of all, I want to celebrate the diversity of this great coalition. Be careful what you ask for, because you might get it, and that's what I think happened last year when they challenged us communities to come together. And in the Latino community, various organizations came together to educate the community about what was going on with this law. And organizations from different backgrounds came together under the leadership of the PA Voter ID Coalition to educate the community and fight against this affront to voting rights. We remain committed to working to educate the community. We remain committed to supporting the efforts to defeat the law. And at the same time, we always remain committed to ensuring that language access is assured for those who are not who are not English proficient. We want to make sure that the limited English proficient have equal access to voting, and especially now that they're trying to ask that people get certain IDs through PennDOT, we want to make sure that also PennDOT and is accessible to people who are limited English proficient. It's federal law. That portion of the Voting Rights Act is still in effect. So there's a lot of work to be done, but there's a lot of good people working to get that work done. And this has brought a lot of good people together and a lot of different communities together on a common cause, and we hope to build on it.
Hello, I'm State Representative Vanessa Brown, and I'm the chair of the Pennsylvania Legislative Black Caucus. The Black Caucus stands for people of color. We also stand against any policy or legislation that would not improve the quality of their lives or to make anything unjust to them. I'm going to be very brief, and I just want to make one statement, that all of the members of the Pennsylvania Legislative Black Caucus will continue to stand firm against any group that design legislation that is insidious, that will hold down people that are defenseless. This legislation, voter ID, will only impact the lives of those who cannot stand for themselves. We must stand against the small interest groups that will work their own interests against that part of our populace. So we will continue to stand firm in that fight. We are thankful for all the members of this coalition. We're thankful for the leaders of this coalition. And we will be there again and again and again. We will not stand down.
Pete Matthews, President, Aspen District Council 33. And our union represents workers in all departments of city government. And we continue to proudly serve the citizens and taxpayers of the city in spite of being denied a fair contract for 5 years by Mayor Nutter. I'm very specific on that, who our enemy is. While our union is obviously deeply involved in complex and time-consuming negotiation, we recognize that one of the most basic rights of our members is the right to vote. We honor those who went before us and sacrificed so much in order for all of us to enjoy this basic civil right, the right to vote. At District Council 33, we believe that voting is a right and a responsibility. Our members are registered to vote, and we will make sure that they all have valid IDs. I'm here today to pledge the support of AFSCME District Council 33 to sponsor and conduct voter ID assistance clinics and to help distribute the nonpartisan educational materials provided by the coalition that is designed to help citizens get the state mandated voter IDs under Act 18, the Pennsylvania ID law. District Council 33 will do our part to help registered voters get to PennDOT offices to secure their voter IDs, and will contribute to the coalition radio advertising campaign on the need for compliance with Pennsylvania Act 18. We intend to do everything in our power to fight back against the further erosion of our voting rights as this struggle continues.
If you don't educate people about voting, if you don't educate our citizens and our community about their rights, if you don't educate our people about how to survive in this environment, then you have to build prisons. And you have to keep on building prisons because you make an industry out of it. And you make an industry out of people's their weaknesses. So that's not the kind of America that I read about. That's not the kind of America that we want. If this is the kind of America that you want, then don't support this. But if you want the strong America that we all know it can be, then you gotta support this, because the only thing that keeps America straight is your right to vote.
The first speaker talked about the march on August 24th. Whether you all know it, 1199 was Martin Luther King's favorite union. and whether you know it or not, when we marched 50 years ago, I was there. We were the largest delegation in Washington, D.C. then, and we are working to make sure on the 24th of August we'll be there this time, because this time is as essential as it was then. And we urge you all to join us there, because this is part of the same fight.